Hello, everyone. This is Rabbi Ari Sachs of Congregation Beth Mordecai coming to you with another edition of this week's online Parashah class, where we go over the week's Torah portion and take some interesting element of it to discuss together. This week's Torah portion is Parashat Tissa, which is, we have two more Torah portions after this to get to the end of the book of Exodus. And this Torah portion, especially the second third, which we're focusing on today, is a very famous selection, which includes the sin of the golden calf, in which the Israelites who are at the base of Mount Sinai rebel against God by offering a golden calf that Aaron the priest sort of builds for them. And then afterwards, Moses comes down with Joshua wondering, what is that noise in the camp? It's the sound of jubilation. Sees the sin, throws the tablets down as seen in the Ten Commandments, and the calf is destroyed. And actually, we read later on in this Torah portion about how the Levites who joined Moses after the sin went and wiped out all of the Israelites who participated in the sin of the golden calf as a purge, to be able to rid the nation of sin. So this particular Torah parsha, or I should say, this particular selection is a challenging one if we're concerned about the aspect of judgment, that we should understand why the Israelites actually committed such a sin. And in fact, there are some elements of this particular there are some elements of the particular story of the golden calf, which sometimes I think gets a little bit overlooked. For instance, and we're going to take a look at one of the verses now, it certainly seems that the Israelites were concerned the most with the fact that they had no leader. And so we're going to turn now for a moment to Sefaria.org. And we're going to take a look at simply verse 1. Vayar ha'am, and the nation saw, ki voshesh Moshe laredet min hahar, when Moses had delayed from coming down from the mountain, that he was up on the mountain for 40 days, though it wasn't clear how long he was supposed to be up there. Vayikahel ha'am ala Haron, and the nation gathered against, or they came to Aaron. Vayomeru elav, kum aseh lanu Elohim. They said to him, come, make us a God, an Elohim. Asher yelchu lefanenu, who shall go before us? Ki zeh Moshe ha'ish, because this man Moses, asher ha'elanu me'eretz Mitzrayim, who took us out of the land of Egypt, lo yadanu mehayalo. We do not know what has happened to him or what shall become of him. And I think that what's interesting in this particular verse is not so much that they gathered against Aaron and said, make for us this eventually golden calf, which, by the way, that's not what they're asking for. They're not asking for a particular idol. They're asking for a God to go before them. And the reason why they need this God is because Kizeh Moshe Ha'ish, this man Moses, Asher He'elanu Me'eretz Mitzrayim, who had taken us out of the land of Egypt, we don't know what happened to him. And that phrase, I think, is particularly striking because on one hand, you have that it describes the man Moses, so that he is a human being who Asher He'elanu Me'eretz Mitzrayim, who took us out of Egypt. Now we know, as the text describes, that it is God who takes him out of Egypt, and it seems to be a divine action, meaning that only a God can be able to do such a thing for the Israelites. There's no human being who could take them out of the land, and yet they describe not God necessarily, but this man Moses who does so. And part of me wonders if the juxtaposition of this language of the man Moses and of the and of the fact that he's able to bring the Israelites out of Egypt, which seems to be a divine characteristic that only a God could be able to do so, that juxtaposition is based on the fact that Moses went up and they don't know what happened to him. As if he was this man who may have actually been a God to them at that point, but now that he's gone, he now simply has become a man. And what do you do with that? As the Israelites, what do you do with the fact that you don't have this being before you who's able to lead you into wherever it is you're supposed to be going? Because they don't know where they are. They don't know where they're going. And it seems that from this perspective, that the creation of the golden calf was created for the Israelites to have some sense of divine leadership, meaning that they were being led by a source that they could identify as being greater than them. That for them, there is a separation between humanity and God. Yes, you may have individuals like Moses who kind of went in between the two. Maybe that they thought for a while that Moses was God, but now that he's gone, they realize he's just a man. And the Israelites said, we need a God. We need something else to lead us forward. And as such, this separation between humanity and God, I think, is very clear in the story of the golden calf. Not so much as the fact that human beings can't be like God, but that human beings need God to be a leader, need God to be able to direct them in the right path. And that, I think, is a very important element to the verse that actually appears immediately prior to the story of the golden calf, the verse that I want to focus our attention on now. It is the verse in which Moses seemingly receives the Torah from God to eventually give to to give to the Israelites, and that this shall be the instruction for the people. So we turn now back to Sefaria.org for Exodus chapter 31, verse 18. Final verse in this chapter, the first verse of this triennial reading. Vayiten el Moshe, and he gave to Moses kechaloto ledaber ito behar Sinai, when he had finished speaking on Mount Sinai, shnei luchota edut, these two tablets of testimony, luchot even, tablets of stone, ketuvim be'etzba Elohim, that were written according to the finger of God. Now, this particular verse has, I think, a couple of interesting points to it that I want to raise. The first is this word kechaloto. On one hand, it refers to the same, it has the same root as vayachulu hashamayim v'haaretz, where at the beginning of chapter 2 in Genesis, when God said that he finished creating the entire world, we have this root of kaf lamed he, that is used here to say that when God finished speaking to Moses. The midrash likes to play off of this word, that the word kaf lamed he, the root kaf lamed he, in addition to meaning finish, also means bride. And so that there's a connection between God and Moses, or God and Israel, as that between a groom and a bride. So that there is a relationship between the two. So already the text in and of itself, from that perspective of the midrash, is indicating that God and humanity are supposed to be working together. It's not simply that God is going to lead us with this Torah or with God's instruction, and that's simply going to be it, but rather that there is some relationship between God and humanity. But the other interesting aspect in terms of God finishing speaking is, what does it mean that God finished speaking? In what sense did God finish speaking to Moses and then give these tablets of stone to him? And to answer that question, which I think is going to really point us in a certain direction regarding understanding the relationship between humanity and God, I'm going to turn to a text from the midrash, from Exodus Rabbah, from Shemot Rabbah, that you can see on your screen, and we're going to read together. You can follow along in the English. I'm going to go in the Hebrew, translating as I go along, and sometimes jumping into the translation that's written on the page. Davar acher, another thing. Vayiten el Moshe, and God gave to Moses. Amar Rav Abahu, said Rabbi Abahu, Kol arba'im yom, all of the 40 days, she'asa Moshe lemala, that Moses was up above, meaning up above, maybe in heaven or at least at the top of Mount Sinai. Vehaya lamad Torah v'shocheach, that for all the 40 days he learned Torah with God, but then forgot it all. Amar lo ribona olam, but then Moses said to God, Master of the universe, yesh li arba'im yom ve'eni yodea davar. I have spent these 40 days and I don't know anything. Ma'asah kadosh baruch hu. And so what did the Holy One, blessed be he, do? Misha hashlim arba'im yamim, that when the 40 days came to an end, natan lo hakadosh baruch hu et Torah matana, that he gave the Torah as a gift to Moses. Shene'emar vayiten el Moshe, as it says that he gave to Moses, meaning giving in the sense of a gift. And so on one hand, you can look at this particular text and see and say that the Torah in many ways is God's gift to humanity to give them a sense as to how to live their lives, because God can't necessarily pass it along verbally to Moses all at one particular time over the course of those 40 days. But you have to ask, but even then you still have to ask the question, does that mean that the Torah as we would have it now, is that Torah exactly what God said to Moses over the course of the 40 days? Meaning, is it simply that because Moses forgot the Torah, that God wrote down everything that would have been said during those 40 days and then passed it along? Or is the Torah a sense of a different kind of a gift? Or that Moses, God in speaking to Moses, had a different agenda than simply teaching the exact Torah that we have in front of us? V'chi kol haTorah lamad Moshe. But are you saying that over the course of those 40 days that Moses learned the entire Torah? Ketiba Torah, as it says in the Torah, or specifically in the book of writings in Job chapter 11, verse 9, Aruka me'eretz midah urchava maniyam. That translates here, its measure is longer than the earth and broader than the sea. In other words, that Torah is so vast that in thinking about what it is that the Torah is supposed to teach us to live a life according to God's ways, it is way too vast, way too big for us to simply learn in the context of 40 days. People spend lifetime learning Torah, and even in that lifetime, only get to a certain kind of a level. That there's always these depths of meaning of Torah that happen throughout our lifetimes. And as such, is it possible to learn the entire Torah over the course of the 40 days? It doesn't seem so. And so what did God say to Moses over the course of those 40 days if it wasn't the entire Torah? Ula arba'im yom lamda Moshe, but did he teach him over the course of the 40 days? Ella klalim lamdehu hakadosh baruch hu Moshe. Rather, the Holy One, blessed be he, shared the principles, the larger principles of the Torah that he gave to Moses. Havi kechaloto ledaberito. And then afterwards, God finished speaking to Moses. It reminds me, this selection, of when the famous story in the Talmud when a proselyte comes to Hillel and says, "Teach me the entire Torah on one foot." Now, he'd gone to many other rabbis and they said, "We can't do that." But Hillel gave him a general principle to love your neighbor as yourself. And then the rest is something for you to go and learn. And so in that idea, meaning that when someone is there for a short time, you give them a general sense of the principles around what it is that you want to be learned. And then the people have to go and learn it themselves afterwards. They have to take it upon themselves. And according to one modern commentary from the Eitz Chaim Chumash, it indicates that when God gave the general principles to Moses, the expectation was that Moses would fill in the details for the people. That is to say that the giving of the Torah is not necessarily the giving of the entire Torah kula, of every last single word, every last thing that is written by the hand of God, but rather that's supposed to be about knowing some of those principles that seemingly come directly from God, and then we as humanity have to come in and fill the details. Because we can't understand every little detail from God. That would take too long. That would be too much. We can't necessarily be on that level. But we do need some direction to guide us in the correct path. And that's where I want to bring in some teachings from Plato, from the Greek philosopher. He tries to grapple with the separation between our life in this world and the life of the soul, and the this, not the supernal necessarily, but in the higher level of being, which we are not a part of in this world. He uses a very famous allegory of the cave to represent how we only see the shadows of life here on the world, and that when we expose ourselves to the light, that exposure changes our perspective in both negative and positive ways. Sensible man will remember that the eyes may be confused in two ways: by a change from light to darkness, or from darkness to light. And he will recognize that the same thing happens to the soul. When he sees it troubled and unable to discern anything clearly, instead of laughing thoughtlessly, he will ask whether, coming from a brighter existence, its unaccustomed vision is obscured by the darkness, in which case he will think its condition enviable and its life a happy one, or whether, emerging from the depths of ignorance, it is dazzled by excess of light. If so, he will rather feel sorry for it, or if he were inclined to laugh, that would be less ridiculous than to laugh at the soul, which has come down from the light. In other words, what this is describing is that when someone, and we've all experienced this in our own ways, when someone exists in the dark, that when the light is shown, that our eyes have this moment of pain as our eyes adjust to the light. And the question is, would it be better for us to live in the darkness of ignorance, or to come to the light of the divine, to come to the light of that higher level? Or to put it another way, from the other direction, if we are in that moment of light and then we come back down to the darkness, how our eyes need to adjust as well. And that process of adjusting between the higher levels and the levels down here, at least in the eyes of Plato, is a very difficult journey, to the point where some people say, I don't want to change my eyesight. I don't want to take on that vision. It is a very troubling one. It is a difficult one for me. And so we may feel that there needs to be always a difference between God and us, and that there is no way to really bring the two together, because we are afraid both of coming up into the light, and if we are up above, of thinking that we're going to come down into ignorance and have to live in ways which do not fit with our new understanding of ourselves and of the world. And yet, at the same time, as this challenging reality of, or this challenge of change exists for anyone who is exposed to either dark or light, Plato does say that this kind of movement between the two is critical for us as human beings. If this is true, then we must conclude that education is not what is said to be, as some who profess to put knowledge into a soul which does not possess it, as if they could put sight into blind eyes. On the contrary, our own account signifies that the soul of every man does possess the power of learning the truth and the organ to see it with. And that just as one might have to turn the whole body round in order that the eye should see light instead of darkness, so the entire soul must be turned away from this changing world until its eye can bear to contemplate reality and that supreme splendor which we have called the good. Hence, there may well be an art whose aim would be to effect this very thing, the conversion of the soul in the readiest way, not to put the power of sight into the soul's eye, which already has it, but to ensure that instead of looking in the wrong direction, it is turned the way it ought to be. In other words, I think that what he's saying is profound. We have the ability to come to the light. We don't necessarily need to create a calf that we think is going to lead us in a direction because we will never be able to reach that level. But rather, we need the tools to simply see the correct direction. And that's why the Torah is so significant, because the Torah is not this idol to put in front of us, but is this text to come and learn, to give us that education, to be able to lead us in a path that we already feel that is already a part of us, and yet we may be facing a wrong direction. And that the fact that we are given simply these principles by God to be able to follow means that the beauty of the Torah comes when we take those principles and apply ourselves to them. When we apply our own sense of what the right direction is to those principles in order to guide our lives here in the correct direction. Because the chasm between God and us, between the divine and the earth, is really only in our imaginations. That if we truly see in ourselves the ability to be turned in that direction towards God, that if we see our soul as capable of leading us on a right path, then we will be open to the teachings that will help lead us there. And that those teachings will be both God's creation and our creation at the same time. And so my hope is that this teaching leads us to recognize that we may like looking at a calf and saying, you lead us in whatever direction you can because we'll never be able to get to you. But that the Torah in and of itself is a gift from God to say, I want you to be a part of this journey because you can be. Your soul can be turned in that direction. You can be educated in a way that you can see for yourself that I put this spark in you and that you can follow my ways. I'll give you the basic principles that will lead you down that path, but then you must fill in those details in order to make your lives as holy as mine. And so may we enjoy that journey, as may we open the text of the Torah to see where it is that leads us, to be able to understand its principles and to be able to apply them in our own lives. Take care. Shabbat Shalom. See you next week.